A camera that I had been looking for a long time was the f100. This is a Nikon camera, a Nikon f100, which was a semi-professional, some people call it a professional camera. It came out in 1999. It was one of the last sort of film cameras Nikon made. In the lineup of Nikon cameras at that time, you had the f65, which was an entry single lens reflex. You had the f70, which was quite good single lens reflex. The f80 was excellent, and then you have the f100, and finally the f5/f6. The f100, the big difference between the f100 and the f80 is it's built from a metal body and it's incredibly solid. Having said that, it's not as heavy as the f4 or f5. They are not easy cameras to get hold of. I had been looking for one of these for a long time. I looked online, I looked in camera fairs, and ironically I found this one in my local camera shop, and it was reasonably priced without a lens, but I happen to have quite a lot of lenses. The body was slightly sticky, which is an issue, but it was priced accordingly. You can sort of clean the stickiness off, but if you aren't careful, you then destroy the actual layer. But I carefully did a little bit, and it's not that sticky at all. No, you use a little bit of ethanol or alcohol to do that. So what is so special about the f100? I think the first thing is to say it is the strength of the body, and this is a relatively, when I say waterproof, I wouldn't take it underwater, but it's a weatherproof camera, so that makes it ideal for all sorts of situations. Plus, it's designed as a upper end camera, so the features on it are just really nice. We start with the ergonomic side. It just holds really well. And let's talk about some of the features. Well, first of all, we'll start with loading the film. And these cameras do unfortunately have a bit of a reputation for this catch here breaking. This is absolutely fine. Open the camera, obviously film it in there and across, and shut the camera. Now, a brief word about setting the ISO. You can set it so it's manually, you can set, if your cassette is like one of these without a DX coding foil on, you have to set your ISO. If you've got a cassette which is DX coded, then you can set that onto DS there. Hope that makes sense there. So that's the ISO setting. Now, the camera can be shot in different modes. You've got a manual mode where you change at the front, you're changing your aperture, and at the back you're changing your shutter speed. So that's the manual mode, and it's got a little pointer in the middle so you can tell where it's perfectly exposed. If we press mode, we can then change to shutter speed, priority. Now this camera goes all the way up to 8,000th of a second. So that is something people really like about this camera. A very, very fast shutter. So it's a great sports photography camera or even wildlife. So the shutter speed settings are excellent there. Then you've got aperture priority. So shutter priority, program, which basically automatic, decides for you, and then aperture, A for aperture priority. You set the aperture. Again, you set it on the control knobs here. Now, you do need to check for the aperture you control at the front here. If you are using one of the older lenses, you need to make sure that it's set at the smallest f-stop, f22, and then you are altering the settings here. this camera is great as well because you can use the older Nikon lenses. I've talked before about Nikon lenses. It's a complete saga of its own. Although the F fitting was F mount went from 1959 until recently. Not all F mount lenses are the same. I'm not going to go into it now, but just be a bit careful. Don't just think because you've got an F mount lens it's automatically going to fit your camera. It might, but it might not. So that is the modes here. You've got a plus and minus for exposure adjustment. Up here, this here is for your exposure, whether you are going to spot meter, average meter, or a central metering, right? And I've got it on average here. Spot metering is where it's a very narrow zone of exposure. Average is average. So again, you can set the exposure type. You can also, the camera has a matrix of focusing points, and you can again have an average, or you can move your focusing point about by using this little knob here. And if you want to lock that point, you put it on lock. You've also got a very, very useful eye adjustment there. Very useful if you are wearing spectacles. The CSM custom settings, I'm not going to go through now. You can find, if you buy a f100 and want to find out all the different ways you can set the camera, so you can set it up so it automatically rewinds the film at the end, or it doesn't and you have to press a button. There's lots of different, you can set up the counter slightly differently, and that is in the custom setting. So you press that and then you've got a range of, I think it's 12 different it's probably more. You've got a range of custom settings there. You've got here a single shot, continuous shot, some flash settings here. You've got a flash socket here if you want to do a wide coupling. Changing the lens down here, and you've got this very useful Nikon that will close down the aperture so you can see what your depth of field actually is like when you're using the camera. Obviously hot shoe on the top for flash, and again this camera is great for flash and very flexible. I say that's about it, but it is a camera with a lot of features. I go back to the fact of how good the handling of the camera is and how sturdy the camera is. Having said that, did it take any decent photographs? How is it to use in the field? Well, let's find out. It was a wonderful sunny morning when I was in Bridport, and I thought this is a good chance to test the Nikon f100. And I have a former 100 pan film in, and I think 100 ASA I quite like. Later on I tested the camera with a HP5 film, and I must say I much prefer the finer grain of the 100 ASA. I've got a yellow filter on the camera here, and it's really helping the sky to pop. The metering I think is fantastic on the camera, and I will try not to get too enthusiastic about this camera, but it is actually a dream to use. That could be several reasons. A, it's just a very well designed camera, but I could be slightly biased because I've been using Nikons for a long time, and my favourite DSLR camera is actually a D300. And there's a lot of similarities between this f100 and the D300S. This is getting towards the end of the 100 ISO film, and you can see how fine the grain is on this. A little bit of flare from the lens, and it's in these sort of situations I think medium format probably is preferable. But here I'm using the 400 HP5 film, and suddenly the sun went in, and I was quite glad in one sense that I had the more faster film. However, the quality just isn't as good as the 100 ISO, but the camera, really like the camera. Looking forward to using it more and more. It is a very well designed camera. It's just a shame that they are so hard to find. Thanks for watching.